My name is Fred Roehl. I'm a Chugyoung Tribal Council member from Dillingham, Alaska and Bristol Bay. What I'm sharing is something that happened back in 2006. Me and a couple family members, a couple years prior, my elder started doing research on prospecting and mining and stuff like that in 2004, and he started ordering the portable sluice boxes and the pans and everything to do with small tiny hobbies type of gold panning. And it worked out to where 2006 we all had the free time, and it was mid-September when we left Dillingham. It was September 13th 2006, because it was the day after my birthday. So we packed up everything and we left the 13th, the morning tide, and we're making our way up to the Nuyakuk River, which is 248 river miles from Dillingham, going up the Nuyakuk River there. And it took a couple days travel because my elder was in his 60s, upper 60s, and he wasn't like feeble by any means, but he wasn't spry. He wasn't, going to run a marathon by any means, but riding on the water up here in Alaska, it's cold. It chills you to the bone really fast. It doesn't matter if it's a 60, 70 degree day out, you get cold quick. And so we stopped a couple times, first Nuyakuk and then Kaliganik again for gas, and we make it up to the Nuyakuk on September 17th. It was a couple hours before dark. And when we got there, me and my cousin, we were worker bees for the elder. My elder, it was in our culture, when an elder asks for help, you go and help. You don't question what the job is. You don't ask to get paid. None of that. You just go and help. That's what you're there for. And so we immediately start unloading the skiff there. Now, where we were at on the Nuyakuk River, we were in a little shack. It was an old abandoned salmon counting tower, and it was only 8 foot square, and it had a 50 style trailer that had been MacGyvered onto the back of it as sleeping quarters, and that back portion was all blacked out. This little shack, when you go up the riverbank, there's a 6-7 foot drop on the riverbank from where the river water is to the top of the bank where this shack was, and then about 20 feet of a little path to this little shack. When you're facing the shack from the riverbank, looking at the front door, you can see the old tower that people used to climb to count salmon one by one. And that was off to the right, just a little ways closer to the riverbank. Off to the left was the tower. Off to the right, there's a path that cut back to where this old outhouse was. Long since been stopped being in use. It was, it'd been there a while. And it being remote Alaska, you're not allowed permanent structures, so everything was on skids. This particular shack was on some skids to where you couldn't have a permanent structure because of state law. Well, inside this shack, 8 foot square, when you step inside, there's a small card table immediately on the left, and to the right, there's a small oil drip stove in the corner, rinky-dink little counter on that right-hand side, and 2 matching windows. They mirrored each other. They're 18 inches by 24 inches on each side, basically centered in the wall. And then middle on the back wall is the entrance to that little cubby, as I call it. It's just an old 50 style trailer that had a couple bunks in there. So it was a couple hours before dark, and we got everything moved in there. And while we're moving stuff in, my elder was using the little Coleman stove, the little propane stove, and he made I believe it was a salmon chowder, which was delicious. So I wanted to go and scout for a black bear that I was asked to take a look out for by an elder in Nuyakuk. He said there was a 7 foot plus black bear up in that area, and if I saw it on a berry patch, he wanted to meet, a berry patch bear. So with that in my mind, I kind of wanted to go and look for this bear, but with it so close to dark, it just wasn't worth the time. So we ended up just hanging out in there while he was finishing cooking. And we ate and all that. And after we're done eating, they started playing cribbage. As they were doing that, my elder is basically giving us marching orders for the next day. You know, I want bucket samples from way up over here. I want samples from there. He's lining out how he wants the day to go. It's roughly about half hour after dark, and I'm adjusting. On the way up, I had just bought in this brand new shotgun, this 12 gauge 870. It was going to be a slug gun, and it had the rifled barrel. It was matte stainless, beautiful gun. It had a ghost ring sight in the back, and I was adjusting that rear sight because I had shot it a couple times coming upriver and it was off. And so I'm making my adjustments to that and having this discussion back and forth with my elder and cousin. And as we're in the middle of this discussion, the whole place just makes this creak sound. We all kind of look at each other because if there was a wind doing it, we would know. We're just in this little glorified cardboard box. So this place creaks, and as I look over above my cousin's shoulder, there's a small gap before the top of the window, and I saw something dark move. I couldn't make it out. It was dark out, but I definitely saw something dark move out of view of the window. And immediately he jumps up and says, "That's not funny," because my eyes got big, I guess, you know. And so he jumps up, says, "That's not funny." And I said, "No, it's probably a bear," because the Nuyakuk River is a salmon river. There were spawn outs everywhere on our way up, you know what I mean? So it only made sense. There's a bear outside. So he grabs a 30-06. I grabbed the spotlight and the shotgun I had in my hand. And our plan was, we're going to open the door with the spotlight and we're going to run this bear off or put it down if it charges us. Once we opened the door, I immediately turned that spotlight on to the right towards the riverbank because that's the side I saw movement. So just making sure that bear isn't tropping along the riverbank. You know, if it was going on its way, we were going to let it go. But there was nothing there. We take one step out, and he's off my left-hand shoulder with the 30-06, and I pan with that big, is a 1,000,000 candle-watt power spotlight. And it took one of those big 6-volt batteries. And so I pan from my right to the left, and as I'm panning, there's about 50 yards difference or distance between the riverbank and the tree line on the inside of the riverbank side. As we pan over there, all of a sudden that light reflects 3 sets of eye shine. This eye shine was humongous, looked like fence post markers. And immediately we knew something was very, very off because we could see these 3 figures standing there, but they didn't try to duck out of the way of the light or anything. They did not care they were being seen. So immediately we're right back inside. And as soon as this place is a glorified shack. It's 5/8 plywood, 2x4 construction, and there was just this little J-hook with an eyelet for the door as a lock, right? So what was weird about it, well, one of the weird things is once I hooked that J-hook, it was like we had earmuffs on all of a sudden. It was the pressure in the air totally changed. My cousin's right next to me. My elder's 8 feet away, if that, and they sounded further away than what they were because of this pressure. And I'm talking, I was like, there's a hairy man, there's 3 hairy men out there, and I'm asking my cousin, did you see that? You know, it was a little chaotic because he was talking a little bit, but I was over talking him. And in the course of talking to my elder and all that, in a snap, my cousin is under that card table. And when we come in the door, I had set down the spotlight and I'm holding my shotgun offhand as this conversation started because I had to set it down to hook the J hook. And so he's under the card table. He's got the 30-06 by the barrel, kind of holding it like a paddle. And it looks like he's having a seizure because he's so locked up. The look on his face was just terror. So we're looking down at him, and he's in the process of wetting himself in these moments. As we're looking down, we look at each other, me and my elder, we're less than 8 feet apart at this point, and we look down at him again, and we notice he's looking across the room towards that riverbank side window, or not riverbank, but the tree side window, the inside of the river or whatever. He's looking across at that window, and so we look at each other, and then we turn and look, and that's when I saw this thing looking at us in the window. So when I made eye contact, initially I saw it looking down at my cousin. The only thing I saw in that window was just below the bottom of the nose and then up to the top of the eyebrow in an 18-inch space. This thing had ash gray skin, looked like old Native American tintype photo, where you see those real defined wrinkles. This thing had similar, but a lot more of them. It looked Native American around the eyes, heavy brow ridge. The nose was a very small bridge of the nose and very flat to the face, nostrils down, very wide at the bottom of the nose. Ashen gray skin, the hair appeared to be black. And initially when I saw it, it was looking down, and then it turned and looked at me, and the eyes were like translucent black marbles. It's really hard. They were very eerie because there was the slightest bit of eye shine from the lamp we had going above the card table where they were playing. There was a Coleman lantern that it was the white gas type where you have to pump it up. Anyway, there was a little bit of eye shine from that in its eyes when it turned and looked at me. And when it looked at me, I immediately, there was no mind speak, there was nothing like that, but I immediately knew I was food. Like I was, it was the energy in the air. There was no words that needed to be said. I felt like the rabbit in the hole with the wolves circling the hole. And it started moving out of view of the window, and I shot 3 times through the wall with that shotgun, just thump, thump, thump. Typically, when you shoot a gun indoors like that, your ear's going to be just ringing off the chain. It's going to, but because that pressure, that once I hit that J-hook when I came in the door, it just sounded like a thump. That pressure I'm speaking about lasted the whole night through. The whole, everything I'm telling you about, that pressure lasted through, which was very odd. So I shoot through the wall, and simultaneously there's a scream, and the place shifts a couple feet. The scream was so loud, it reverberated throughout the whole little shack, and it rang that pot of stew, what was left of it on that stove, like a tuning fork. It was this wing, you could hear it ringing from how loud that scream was. The force of the movement, it almost took me off my feet. I thought they were going to throw us in the river. I thought we were going for a ride in the river. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, and it just goes dead quiet. No sooner than the place shifted and that pot is ringing, my elder ducked back into that little cubby area and sat down on the bunk. I stood there a moment in shock because when this thing made eye contact with me, it was like every fiber of my being wanted to run away, but it was stuck in my skin, so it felt like an electrical jolt to my whole body. I ended up putting one of the chairs up against the door for whatever good that would do. The other chair, I turned the back of it to that little opening to the dark cubby, and I essentially sat down in that chair, keeping an eye on both windows, gripping that shotgun very, very tightly. I initially tried to get the 30-06 from my cousin, but he had such a death grip on it and it was loaded. I didn't want to accidentally shoot him with that. So as I'm sitting there, all I had was my thoughts. My elder wasn't responding to me. My cousin was in no shape. I mean, he would babble stuff every once in a while, but he was not right. And so while I'm sitting there, I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because in all honesty, I was in shock. It was like, what's really happening? Because, we're from the culture. We know of their existence. We've seen them at a distance in the past. It was never this level of out to get you, so to speak. They've always made noise and we would leave. So as I'm sitting there, the only way I could stop shaking like hard, I was shaking really, really hard. And it wasn't until I resigned myself that I was a dead man and I wasn't going to see the other side of what was going on, that I was able to remove myself from that, like, that frozen in your tracks fear. I was still freaked out. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But once I resigned myself to death, I was able to function. I was able to do things like pump the lamp. That lantern, I can't, still to this day, I cannot stand white light above my head and a hissing sound of a Coleman lantern. I just can't. But it was so hard in those moments because I sat there in that chair for hours, at least a handful of hours, gripping that shotgun so hard I'd have to let go every once in a while because my hands were hurting, just because I had a death grip on this gun. And it took everything in me to even let go of the gun long enough to pump that stupid lantern. But I did it because I didn't want it to go dark. I was so freaked out. And when I tell you the adrenaline rush that would just revitalize when a moth would hit the window, my God. There was several times I almost Swiss cheesed the whole place just out of just like freaking out, because when the moth hits the window, it sounds just like a finger tap against the window. But anyway, so I sat there, 5-6 hours, something like that, in dead quiet, keeping an eye on the windows. I couldn't see nothing. It was pitch black outside. I couldn't see nothing if I wanted to. I kept looking to make sure nothing was looking in at me. And eventually, there was some conversation with my elder because I was freaking out. I'm yelling at these two, help me, help. I just shot this thing, help me. My elder, basically, when he would respond to anything, it was in context of something else. The price of salmon that year, anything but what was happening in the moment. It was like a separation or something. It was real weird. He wasn't engaging me about what was happening. So, that conversation went nowhere. And once my cousin, who was under the table, started making more sense and coming out of being locked up and just freaking out, I started reassuring him, hey, I shot it. It ran away. It's not here. And I had no clue. Yeah, I'm just trying to get him to help me. I'm trying to get him back on his feet. I got the rifle from him. I set it on the little card table, and we started getting him changed out because he had wet himself. Well, I because it was real traumatic, I couldn't say exactly, it was 45 minutes or hour and 20. I couldn't tell you how long it took to get him off the floor, changed, and for me and him to start conversating. And I asked him, I was like, you saw what I saw outside? And he goes, yeah, I saw that. And then I asked him, why'd you go under the table? What happened? And what he said is from his vantage point off my left shoulder, he was more straight in line with that window. And he said the thing was out there and it showed his teeth at him. And that's when it freaked him the hell out. And he lost control and went under the table. He said once he hit the floor, that's when it came in closer to the window and looked down at him. And then, me and my uncle looked at each other and then turned and looked, and that's when it looked at me, and then I fired. He relayed that the teeth were big and blocky, like a horse teeth, like horse teeth, but the eye teeth were just a little more pronounced than the standard human, not fangs by any means. But that's what caused him to fall under the table. So I reassured him, I shot it, it ran off, it's been quiet. And he was telling me, I know, but I couldn't respond. There's a mental break there that had happened or whatever. Well, we start formulating this game plan of escape. We want to get the hell out of there. And the only way out was the boat, the skiff. Now, when we had beached it right there on the riverbank, we took the anchor line, and it was about 50 to 70 feet. There's first 10, 12 feet was a chain, and then it was tied off with regular rope to the anchor, because this skiff was used for commercial fishing, so it had to have a long anchor line for the rise of the tide and everything, right? So we just drug it out and stuck it in the tundra. So we're tethered, we're locked, and there's no way in hell I'm gonna go and retrieve that anchor that's close to that tree line. It ain't gonna happen. But so we formulate our plan, we start talking about it, and so my cousin brings up, let's spotlight out the windows to see and make sure that they're gone, and make sure they're not around, which is hell yeah, because typically we don't travel in the darkness on a river. There's too many dangers, fallen trees in the way, deadfalls, logs floating in the water, rocks. I mean, all sorts of stuff can go wrong. Even with enough bright lights, you can't make out a tree until you're up on it. Anyway, so we were formulating this plan, and so we grabbed that spotlight, and we had to kill the Coleman lantern because it was getting the mirrored effect from inside the shack. Everything, trying to look out the window, it was like a mirror. So we kill that lantern and we beam out the riverbank side first. And believe me, we were searching. We were looking all over for eye shine, any strange looking brown object, whatever, and there was nothing there. So we go to the opposite side and we started our search from where we saw that 3 sets of eye shine. There was nothing there. I mean, it was just so dead quiet. And we were panning on that bank side towards the tree line. We're panning back real slow from right to left. And once we reached back by that old outhouse, which was approximately maybe 40 feet, like off a 45-degree angle off the back corner of this place, once we reached that, this figure was behind it. This figure was pitch black. It gave no eye shine, no nothing. It was like it absorbed the light. Now, this thing, we could tell it wasn't right up on the outhouse. The outhouse was about 8.5 feet tall, and the top of the outhouse came to what I would guesstimate as center chest, mid sternum area. So this thing was 13 to 14 feet tall. It was at least 5.5 feet wide. It was a big hulking nothingness, a big black dark nothingness, but you could easily see the figure. It was the oddest thing. Its size was massive, but it being absorbing the light was far scarier, because it literally felt like a big black nothing there for us. So we killed that lantern, that lamp, that spotlight. We killed that, and we're all back inside that little cubby area. We're cross barrels. We're freaking out. We're all talking, but not to each other. You know what I mean? That kind of environment. It was chaotic. My cousin was starting to slip away again, so to speak. He was talking about taking this rusty bent nail we've been kicking around since we got there, and talking about nailing the door shut with it. And I'm like, stay with me, because he was slipping back away. I needed him to stay with me mentally. And so anyway, after our initial chaotic, everyone mumbling, talking, and that, we were quiet because we're listening. It was so quiet. We didn't hear any movement. We didn't hear anything. And so over time, with it being quiet and calm, we calm down and we start reinitiating our escape plan. We start discussing just bringing ammo, important stuff, because no one was volunteering to reload everything out of that shack back into the skiff. That wasn't happening. So we formulate a little better plan. I tell him, you're gonna take the lead. You're gonna need to cut that bow line because no one's gonna retrieve the anchor. And so I give him my pocket knife, and he puts it in his pocket, and we're discussing this plan to get out of there. And at this point, we had relit the lantern because we were gathering ammo and stuff of this nature. And as that was happening, I don't know what caused initially. Something caused. I think it was my elder said something about we need to kill that light, because once the lantern was lit, we knew where the ammo was. So it took us mere seconds to grab the ammo And immediately after we grabbed the ammo and stuff, my elder said, kill the light. Well, once the light was off, we were still discussing this escape plan. And in the near distance, we hear this, it sounded like a helicopter rotor wash. Thump, 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 thump. But it was in the near distance. We started feeling it in the ground, and it was shaking. And one of these things ran by, which was real odd feeling. Feeling the shaking of the ground with the impact of this thing running was very surreal. However, once it ran by, it was like they were staged around the place. A group of them started running around different directions and stuff, and you could tell they were different sizes by the impact of their feet when they were running by. They would run around a little bit and then back away, and then run around a little bit more and then back away, and that went on for a little while. But what stood out most was, I believe it was the second time that they did the running around thing. We could hear one of them sniffing the outside of the trailer, which was freaky to say the least. I'm talking white knuckle terror. We were in the pitch dark and we're hearing this, and feeling it in the ground. And then there's this sniffing going on. It was well beyond creepy. I can't even put into words how just still even my dogs today, they can't come sniffing by my ear. I just can't deal with that. That's just an instant trigger. So that happens for a little bit and it stopped. It seemed like 15-20 minutes of them running by, backing off, running by. It could have been a lot longer. Again, we were terrified. White knuckle. When that started happening, we're right back to barrels crossed. We were not a cohesive unit during those moments. So after it had gotten quiet and stayed quiet for a while, our bravery started kicking up. We started feeling more comfortable and talking a little louder and making our game plan. Now, at this time, there's a light change on the horizon. It's going into twilight before it gets light out. And that builds our confidence even more. It's getting daylight. We're going to be able to, see instead of that stupid spotlight. Well, as we're gathering up the bravery to execute this game plan, right? Now, it's twilight. You can't really make out much outside other than it's getting lighter up in the sky, which we were stoked to see. However, we were ready to go. We were literally at the door, and my cousin's in front of me, my elder's behind me, and I had my elder's shotgun over my shoulder. We had changed out his bird shot. He had an old Wingmaster of some kind, this monstrosity of a 12 gauge. But we swapped out his ammo with slugs, and my cousin had my shotgun, and I had the 30-06. And our plan was, cousin was going to go out first. I'm right behind him, guiding the elder. He was going to jump down, cut the line, hop in the skiff, and fire it up, while I helped and aided the elder down the riverbank, because it's 6-7 foot drop, and it was fairly steep. That, and over that time of year in September, you get a lot of dew on the grass, and it's a cut bank, so you got hanging grass, you got muddy conditions. So game plan, he jumps down, cuts the line, fires up, I help the elder, we get the hell out of there. So we were just about to undo that hook and make our run for it, and we hear this thack. It sounded like someone shooting a pellet gun at the wall. It was the side with the door, the side we were going out of. And so the cadence was just like and the sound was identical to a pellet gun shooting plywood. Real loud, thack, thack. But the cadence was kind of random at first, and then all of a sudden it was like a hailstorm of all these little rocks hitting that front side. And immediately we were right back into the cubby hole. We were right back to barrels crossed, freaking out. And it was like every time we were getting the courage to make a run for it, something else terrifying would happen. Now, again, once that hailstorm stopped, dead quiet, not a sound. It just stayed so quiet that I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I could feel my blood pressure pulsing in my eyes. It was bad. So sitting there, thankfully, it started getting lighter outside, to the point to where we didn't need a flashlight to see the tree line or the river. It was light enough we could easily see. So with it being quiet and a lot lighter out, we got more brave to get the hell out of there. Now, we looked out the windows several times, looking to make sure there was nothing around when we made our run. We couldn't look out the front door, but if we had to open it, we were all right there to help defend us, in theory. So we line up and we make our go for it. And we had never done anything like this together ever, but we moved like a well-oiled machine. Like we'd done this every day forever. So we go out and everything's going to plan. We get to the riverbank, which is only 20 feet away. However, in the mind's eye, inside that shack, it felt like 10 miles away because of what was going on. We get to the riverbank. My cousin jumps down, and immediately I sat down to 30-06 because there was no movement, no sound, nothing that we could see around at that moment. And I had my elder come on the riverbank side around me, and I helped him get his footing. I had to kneel down. And when I knelt down for him to get his footing and stuff, that long-ass shotgun I had slung over my shoulder was kind of pushing me forward a little bit because the buttstock was hitting in the grass. And so once he had his footing, I grabbed 30-06. I scooted back about 4 to 6 inches just to get that buttstock off the ground and scoot myself back a little bit because I was feeling like I was being forced forward by the gun. And I stand up, and when I get to full height, this rock, a little bigger than a basketball, whizzes right in front of my face. And everything instantly goes slow motion. My eyes locked right onto that rock, and it flew, and it impacted a part of the river that was at least 3 feet deep. It hit with such force. It sounded like a shotgun going off. And on top of that, it hit the river bottom on a fast moving river before the water could close over it. Yeah, I mean, it was real loud. Well, once that happened, once you heard the impact of that, it was like the earmuffs were off. That pressure that I had been talking about, that had been going on the whole time, that went away. And everything's still slow motion, and I kind of got this tunnel vision happening, but I immediately turned to my left, and I'm holding that 30-06, and that big black nothingness was coming out of the trees. I still couldn't see eyes or a face or anything. Understand, I was in shock. I was terrorized. It was very just slow motion, this tunnel vision going. But I put 3 shots center mass on this big black nothingness. It was roughly 50 yards. I open-sighted 30-06, very powerful gun. This same gun, identical, killed many walrus in a shot or two. 2,000 plus pound walrus dead. It ended them. This thing took 3 shots center mass, and it only stopped moving forward. It didn't flinch. It didn't buckle. It just stopped moving forward. And when I'm looking at this thing with that tunnel vision, there was movement going on left and to its right, off in the tree line. There was movement happening, but my mind's eye told me this thing threw the rock, and I need to stop this thing, right? So those shots were ineffective. I heard the bullets impact this thing. 180 grain soft tip Corlock rounds. Man, deadliest mushroom in the woods. But it appeared to do nothing. So immediately I jumped down the riverbank. My elder's sitting on the edge of the skiff, kind of shimmying himself in or whatever. I run over. My cousin didn't cut that line, so I'm yelling at him. I put the 30-06 in the bow of the skiff, and I'm yelling, "Throw me the knife! Throw me the knife!" I noticed my shotgun on the ground. So when he jumped down, he either dropped it and said screw it, or he just dropped it for whatever reason, but it was right there on the beach. He throws me the knife. I cut the line, and as I cut the line, I'm starting to put the chain in the bow. He had the motor running, and it was idling really, really high because it was cold, and he was trying to shift, and I'm telling him, idle down, it's idling too high. I go over, I shove my elder in because it was time to go. How I shoved him in, he bruised his wrist pretty bad, but when he fell in there, he immediately swiveled and was facing back towards the bow where I was, and same with my cousin. So I'm getting the rest of the chain in, and I'm thinking about, I got to grab that shotgun. And as this is all happening, understand it's chaotic. There's a lot of noise. The motor's running. It's idling real high. Well, just as I'm getting that chain in there, and I'm looking back at him, telling him again to idle down, he gets it into reverse. And as soon as he gets it into reverse, his eyes get big and my elder's eyes get huge, and they're looking back above me over my shoulder at the riverbank. As I'm pushing off, I look back over my shoulder. I saw up to roughly just below the knee, I saw the shins of this thing standing there. Had really dark hair. Wasn't fur, it was hair. And what was odd is it was so dark, it wasn't as black as the one I had just shot. It had really dark hair though, but the tips were like this auburn reddish color, orangish red, rusty kind of brown color to the tips of the hairs. It was the oddest thing, but it stands out because, in those moments, it's like your mind takes these little snapshots of what's happening. So we push off, and as I fling myself into the skiff, I grabbed that 30-06. There was one round left in it, and I'm looking down into the open bolt because honestly, I didn't want to look back and see any of these things. I was focused on loading up that rifle, and I'm looking down into the open bolt, and I remember the skiff is going back and forth pretty hard. I had assumed that my cousin was trying to break friction and get up on step so we could start moving faster because it was a cold motor and everything. So that's what I had assumed, why we were swerving back and forth. I'm looking for 220 grain rounds. It was all chaos, but I'm shoving rounds into this 30-06. Well, we're going along. I look off to my left. I see some movement up in the trees, but there was I couldn't tell you exactly. It was a male, a female, whatever. It was brown in color, and it was moving pretty quick off to our left-hand side, just back inside the trees off the riverbank. I look back down. I get the bolt closed, and I'm still looking for these other rounds, but we're gradually gaining speed, and once we're up to full speed, everything seems to calm down. We couldn't tell we were being followed anymore, but still we were moving. Well, once we got to the confluence of the Nuyakuk and the Nuyakuk River, and we were truly free of the danger, all of a sudden I felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds. The whole night of all that tension and that just gripping everything, I felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds. I literally fell into a heap in the bow of the skiff and basically sobbed for a while. No one said nothing. Once we left the riverbank, there was no conversation about anything that had happened. It was just dead quiet. We kick on down to Kaliganik to get more fuel. When we get there to get fuel, nothing is said. We're just in shock, basically, right? Well, I found out many years later from my cousin, the reason we were swerving back and forth is I was unaware of it, but these things were chucking rocks at our outboard motor. There was a big dent in the transom. It cracked the cowling of the outboard. They were trying to disable us from getting out of there. And so that's what happened. Our relationship was ruined because of that situation. Because I didn't live in the village full time, I would come back for the seasons and stuff. and I hadn't lived there full time in many years. I wasn't viewed as an outsider by any means, but I didn't hold to those superstitions of don't talk about it, don't speak its name, it'll bring a bad omen. I wasn't buying into that, because no one spoke their name, and we went through a bad omen. We went through a bad experience. So that to me was irrelevant. So I was trying to engage them, and I was telling everyone with a pair of ears, watch out on the Nuyakuk. They try to get us. And because of that disconnect between us, it further ruined our relationship. But yeah, that's what happened September 17th into the 18th, 2006.